And now it's Deborah Kobylt Live.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us today on Deborah Kobylt Live. And gosh, look who I've got calling in by Zoom. Big fan, Mark Thompson, big time disc jockey here. I guess that's what you call you, right? For over 25 years in Los Angeles. Such a legend. You've got a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. You were inducted into the Radio Hall of Fame. Congratulations for that.
Thank
You're
you.
here to talk about your life in radio. And your book, which is phenomenal. I did read it cover to cover. Don't Bump the Record, Kid. My Adventures with Mark and Brian. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the time.
Yeah. Let's sort of start in the beginning because I'm no novice to this business, right? TV and radio. I've been living it. And I know how it is. You start, especially back then, very often in the small markets. And you're from Alabama, right?
So let's sort of take it from the Alabama.
Muscle Shells, Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. And talk to me about sort of your interest in radio when you were younger, how you ended up on the radio over there, and how'd you meet Brian?
When I was a kid, I couldn't sleep because my father would not allow any lights on in the house. He was afraid we were going to burn an extra watt. And I learned that if I turned on my radio, the light from the dial would illuminate my room and I could see the monster that was clearly going to eat me. But it worked and I slept and I became addicted to the radio. This is the moment that I fell in love with it because of what it was. The voice on the air was a friend. I knew that if I needed to call him, he would answer the phone. And that was it. I couldn't have known that 5 years, 6 years from that time, I would become that voice on that radio station, because that was the moment, the pinnacle moment that I decided I wanted to be on the radio, because I was so deeply attracted to it. I loved what it was and what it wasn't. It was a very pure medium and I wanted it. And I made it. I got in and began the plight to become a major market jock.
But back then, especially, right, you sort of just do whatever you have to do. I remember on TV, I used to have to run my own teleprompter. And once it just went flying off and just all kinds of stuff like that. It wasn't easy in those little markets. You know, in some ways, it's almost easier when you get to the big markets. Do you know what I mean? Because you have people that are sort of helping you. But back then, you've got to prove yourself. You're doing everything. You've got to, make sure that you're everybody. So how did you even make that happen? Was it just natural for you?
No. I, at 16, I decided, well, I'm going to be on the radio. So I need to go tell the radio stations that I'm going to work there. And I went to all of them and I got the same story. They said, we can't hire you unless you have experience. And I thought, well, how do I get experience if you don't hire me? And one day I went to a daytimer, WSHF radio station. Daytimer means they sign on when the sun comes up. They sign off when the sun goes down. And the general manager told me, I don't have any on-air jobs, but if you want it, you can clean up when we sign off, and then you can go in the control room and practice. And so I did it. I would go after school, I would go and, empty the trash cans and dump out the ashtrays and vacuum. And then I would go in the control room and practice. And it dawned on me that if I rolled tape, it would sound like I was on the air. And that's what I did. And then I took it back to all the radio stations that said I needed experience. And I said, there. I never said I was on the air. I just said, there's my tape. And I got hired. I lied, and I'm proud of it. I figured out the chicken and the egg thing, and that's how I got into it. And it was love at first sound for me.
Gosh, isn't that the story of just so many people? You just got to persevere and figure out what you got to figure out, however you do it, right?
Well, you said it. You said it, Deborah. You do what you have to do, and that's what I had to do.
Yeah. About Brian. When did you first meet Brian?
I was doing personality radio for the first 12 years of my career. And at that time, I was in Montgomery doing afternoons on a hot FM. I was number one and doing very, very well. And I got a phone call from Mark St. John, who was a dear friend of mine, a radio programmer. He and I had talked about climbing the ladder together. And he was going to bring me up to do mornings in Birmingham with him. And he called me and he said, have you ever thought about taking on a partner? And I hadn't. I had always thought, I'm going to do this solo. This is my thing. And he told me about Brian and that he was an improvisational comedian, which I liked, but he had never been on the radio. And I thought, well, how does that work? But I agreed to meet with him. And so Brian flew into Birmingham. I drove up from Montgomery, about a 2-hour drive, and we sat up all night and we chatted. And going into that meeting, I really thought, I'm just doing this to appease St. John. I'm not going to do this. But at the end of our chat, I discovered that Brian held David Letterman on the same pedestal that I did, because David Letterman showed me and the rest of us that stupid comedy, stupid humor has a place in broadcast. And Brian held him in the same regard as I did. And that was when I said, let's try this. Let's see where it goes. And, we're in the Radio Hall of Fame.
Wow. What is it about you radio guys and David Letterman? My husband, and most people know that he's on the radio here in Los Angeles. They've been out here almost 30 years. He loves Letterman. Even sometimes I'll walk down the stairs and he's watching clips of Letterman. He's still, and Carson. He's a big Carson guy too. Were you a Carson fan?
Not as much. No. Johnny was my father's comedian. And Johnny was great, and I'm not disrespecting, but you have to understand that Johnny Carson made the template for late night television. And then everybody who did late night television did it like Carson. And then comes David Letterman. Right. And whatever Johnny did, even though David loved Johnny, whatever David did was a 180 of that. Right. David did things like, I'll give you an example. Late at night, I would, every night I would smoke pot and I would watch Tom Snyder's interview show. And one night, Tom wasn't on. It was some variety show. And the host came out and he said, so this is our first show. And I know that we need to put our best foot forward. So we did some research to find out what America wants to see the most. And it was a clear winner. America has said they want to see a guy welding two pieces of metal together. And as the show progressed, right next to David was a guy for an hour welding two pieces of metal together. And it was the dumbest thing I've ever seen. And I couldn't take my eyes off of it. And
there was a brilliance to it. You either got it or you didn't, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was just unseen. None of us had ever seen anything like what David was doing. Right. And it was must-see television. And I'm not dissing what he did on CBS. It was great. But that 12:30, that late night with Letterman 12:30, that was the kind of stuff that you do in your basement for the kids in the neighborhood. It was garage. It was just gotta see it, doing stuff nobody had ever done before. And that's what David Letterman showed me. It doesn't have to make sense. If you think it's funny, do it. And that's what I did. It affected me personally and my career.
Clearly, because I'm one of your greatest fans. Like, I don't know how many millions of other people, I have to say, because I get it. I got what you did. Just absolutely brilliant. So then how did you end up going from Alabama to Los Angeles? I mean, it's a huge jump, right? What happened?
Well, when Brian and I got together, that very first show, I planned it as though I would be alone because I didn't know what to expect from Brian.
Right.
And on that first show, he did a very smart thing. He sat and watched. He spoke a little, but not much. And he was doing what he should have. He was assessing the situation to see where he might fit in. And then as the days and weeks progressed, he became more and more comfortable. We were connected in a way where we would almost finish each other's sentences. And within 6 months, we were number one in Birmingham, and we were getting better and better and better every day. Yeah. And it was very quick. We were there for maybe a year when the larger markets started calling. Atlanta and St. Louis were going hard for us to come and be there. And I really wanted Atlanta. I was attracted to that. And in the middle of negotiations with those two stations, Los Angeles called, which was kind of a shock because that was a big jump in my radio world to go from Birmingham, Alabama to LA to do a morning show. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah. And, I don't want to give anything else away, but you also have this great story that we'll let people read on this one. How about it? About, contracts and someone who was going to be hiring you elsewhere. Right.
Yeah.
Because this happened to me about anchoring in another market in Florida. And the same thing, this is going to be your job. You're going to be hosting or doing the radio show at this time. Then all of a sudden they change it and do another time, right? I love the way you describe it because it really explains for us the journey that you went through, right? And you have to follow your instincts. One thing I noticed by reading this book from cover to cover, you're great at following your instincts. You seem to know when something works. So here you are now. You're in LA. You're brand new, spanking new out of Alabama. How did that go for the two of you at the beginning? And how did you feel being here? Because I remember how I felt. But I came from Jersey, so that was different. Alabama is a whole different sort of thing.
It is. This is probably the oddest part of it. When we were in Birmingham, Brian and I, we were doing a very standard form morning show. We were doing funny characters who say funny things, and we were reading stories about weird people doing weird things. It's typical morning radio, but we did it very, very well. And when we got to LA, I was literally sitting on the balcony of the hotel right by the 101 and the 405. It's a Courtyard by Marriott now. It's still there. Yeah. And I was sitting on my balcony and I was listening to KLOS. I came from Top 40. KLOS was a classic rock station. And I had never heard most of the songs they were playing. Oh. And the jocks were historians of the music. They knew who played flute on the Jethro Tull thing, and they didn't speak over the intro or the outro. And I thought, Mike, how do we fit into this? And then it dawned on me that we weren't hired to fit into that. We were hired to do what we do. So I sat down with Brian. I said, look, day one, we're going to hit the ground running. We're going to do what we do. Forget all the other crap. We do what we do, and that's what we do. And we went on the air the very first day, and we started playing a Neil Young song. And we started screaming, what the hell is this? That sounds like a cat caught in a barbed wire fence. And I raked the needle across the album and I threw it into the wall. And Brian said, let's put on some good music. And we put on Glenn Campbell's Southern Nights and sang along with it. Well, people started calling KLOS classic rock fans, and they were pissed. Yep. They were screaming and yelling. Neil Young doesn't sing because he has to, or wants to. He sings because he has to. One guy was in tears. And we would put the calls on the air, and we would make fun of the music and them and the listeners. But we weren't mean. We were playful. And even though they were pissed and people had threatened to kill us, they were entertained by what we were doing. And they immediately, because of what we were doing, our name became immediately known throughout the city. And even though it was negative, it was hysterical. And it made us into rebels, guys who bucked the system. And it happened quickly and great. And it wasn't by any design, it just happened. And that was the beginning of what became Mark and Brian.
Wow. I'm almost speechless just listening, because I visualize, and you have the kind of voice where I can visualize every moment of what you're talking about. I love this. And honestly, the greatest people, that's just how it happens, because you can't really plan something like this.
No, you can't.
You just can't. It has to unfold. And then the audience will get it. They'll go like, I get it.
Well,
I get it.
What also was unique was that Brian and I changed. We became a better version of what we were in Birmingham. We had tapped into a new kind of morning entertainment because we were riding that wave of the story that I just told you, and we tapped into different parts of ourselves and the things that we were doing. We weren't doing what we did in Birmingham. Yeah. We were doing something else now, because I've always understood to follow whatever it is that's inside and go with it. And the rule of thumb that I had always had is, if it's funny, if I think it's funny, if I think it's interesting, it goes on the air. So it was quite literally a metamorphosis for us.
Well, as you know, if you let the noise in your head from everybody else, whether it's a program director or a mega fan or whatever, you've lost it at that moment, because then, the originality sort of gets lost. Yes. So the fact that, as I said, I felt it throughout the book. You follow your instinct, and your instinct has served you well, I will tell you. So talk to me about, because you're known for so many of your incredible bits. Give me, if you will, a glimpse into some, or our audience, a glimpse into some of the ones that always stick with you, or better yet, stick with the audience. And they say, gosh, I remember when you, could you tell us? And gosh, I don't even know where to begin, right?
Well,
5 years.
I'll pick this one, because this one was our litmus test. We had been on the air in LA for 6 months. And this particular bit that we did is synonymous for the way that we thought and what made us unique, and that we were doing things differently than you're used to. We were getting ready for Valentine's, and Brian and I were talking about crap we could do. And we were talking about, why don't we melt down some chocolate and dip, dildos and different things in the chocolate? Why don't we do that? And then as we're sitting there, and by the way, the communications between Brian and I early on were very quick. We would hit on something and it would be 10 seconds, because we're in the middle of talking about melting the chocolate. And Brian said, well, why don't we dip ourselves into it? And that was the first moment where the David Letterman thing came into play for me, because I could see him doing that. So we got a giant vat, melted, 4,000 pounds of melted chocolate, a crane, and we invited listeners to come and watch us get dipped into chocolate in front of them. And I knew that this was the moment that I was going to find out if the people were buying into what we were doing. Will they come? Will they show up? And on that morning, the traffic was a snarl mess, with so many thousands of people came to watch stupid happen in front of them. And so we were lowered into the chocolate as we were raised up by the crane. They threw chopped nuts at us. We made all of the newspapers, all of the television stations, because this was brand new. This was fresh morning stuff. Other radio stations were having a best looking Cupid contest, and we were dipping ourselves in chocolate. And at a different angle, knowing that our competition was going to have a Trump impersonator, what can we do? So we would probably take a phone call from Trump's hair, and Brian would do the voice. And see, I haven't even added jokes to it, and the concept is already funny.
It's actually hysterical, because frankly, I can once again visualize Trump's hair talking back to you. Yeah. That's very brilliant. And I love the way that you think. And you don't naturally say, we've got to do something different. It just comes out of your head that way.
Yeah.
It's out different, right? Which is what made you so unique. That's actually terrific. I love that.
Well, that's what we did. That's, I think, what set us apart from everything else. And within a year and a half, we beat Rick Dees and became the #1 show in LA.
Mm. Some of these celebs that when you met them, and I know you've become friendly with many of them, Kevin Pollak, Travolta, I believe he was there when you got your star, right?
He was.
Did you ever meet a celeb, politician, anybody where you just sort of went, I got to pinch myself because like I kind of can't believe I'm in the same room with this person? I'm sure you had many of those moments. The kid from Alabama, but tell us about it.
Well, we had many.
Yeah.
The bigs, not so big. We had thousands, but the one that stands out. Well, first of all, like when Mel Gibson came in, he brought 15 people. Yeah. And, when you're huge in the business, you've got managers and business managers and publicists and agents, and they all want to come protect their percentage. And Mel showed up, and we had many big names that would show up with a host of people. We had Tom Cruise. He was coming in for interview with a vampire. And Tom came in with one person, his sister. And Tom, I was already a big fan of Tom's, and I was looking forward to meeting him. He came in and he was dressed in blue jeans, a white t-shirt, and a flannel shirt brought over it. He was very relaxed. And I was so impressed. This is one of the biggest stars in the world at that time, and he still is, which is crazy. And I was impressed with how plugged in he was, how available he was. He was funny. He was serious. He listened. He responded. And a couple of things happened while he was there as well. We took a commercial break, and his sister had laid a bunch of photographs of Tom out in front of him on the console because he was going to be on Vanity Fair magazine. He had done an interview, and he was the one that would pick the picture that was going to be on the cover. And he was looking at him, and he looked at me and he said, "What do you think?" And I walked over where he was, and I looked, and there was one photograph of Tom standing on the edge of a cliff, and he had his arms out, and the wind was blowing his shirt back. And I said, "I love that one." He looked at his sister, and he said, "That's the one." A month later, I saw that magazine in Barnes and Noble with the picture that I had chosen on the cover. And when the big stars come in, employees from the station would show up early to get a glimpse. And there were probably 100 people in the hallway when Tom left. He was there for 2 hours. Tom did not leave until every picture was taken, every autograph was signed. He stood and listened to every story. And he impressed me from the moment he arrived to the moment he left. He was a genuine, down-to-earth, good dude. And to be a major star, I had never seen that, and I've never forgotten it.
I don't know, but don't you sometimes think some of the really big ones are the most like that? Because there's very, very little that they need to or have to prove to anyone. They already know who they are. They don't need, certainly Mel Gibson is gigantic, so I'm not talking about him. But I found that because I've interviewed so many of these people, including Tom.
Well, there's a little bit of that all over you run the gamut, because again, we had Anthony Hopkins, who came in on the heat of Silence of the Lambs, and he was much the same, playful and great, and just so wonderful to meet an icon of what he does and realize he's a down to earth. But I also saw the diva stuff and Don't Look at Me. I saw that too. So I think it really boils down to, who are you? What kind of person are you? But yeah, that was one of the great things, to see the greats, the bigs, and how they conduct themselves. And I will say that more times than not, they were good people, down to earth, didn't affect them. They were nice. And then a little bit of the diva stuff.
The Christmas party that you had every year was massive.
It was.
Talk to me a little bit about that, would you?
We were one of the first radio stations to do it. It really began when I was in Montgomery doing afternoons, and I thought, let me do a little something for my listeners to say thank you for listening. And the idea was an on-air party. And on that particular day, employees were sneaking in flasks, and everybody was partying in my control room. And I had invited Montgomery's mayor. His name is Emery Fulmer. He was a local celebrity. He was the mayor, but he would go down to local concerts with his deputies and arrest people for smoking pot or drinking or doing whatever they're doing. And the locals loved him for it. And he always made the evening news, which is kind of his thing. So I invited him to come down to my show and read 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. And he did it, and it was great, and it was hysterical to see him walk in with 2 guard dogs on both sides of him, and he was wearing a holster with a pearl handle pistol in it. But he read "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," and the idea of having a Christmas show, I took to Mark and Brian, and it started very humbly, very small, just in the control room, and then it moved on to a hotel by the airport into our heyday, which was the shows at the Palladium. And it was a free ticket. You had to win it from us. And we would invite various guests who had been on the show to come and perform at the Christmas show. And it became synonymous. It became a huge breathing beast that everybody wanted to be at.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You must be very proud of that, right? I mean, when you look back at everything you've done, the good, and we haven't really talked much. If you want to give us a little glimpse, you talk about quite a bit in the book about some of the bad. I mean, I don't know if you want to use that word bad, but some of the challenging, some of the difficult times. Like, for example, when Stern came to town, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was tough. You want to talk to us about that and a little bit about the relationship with you and Brian, how it endured and where it is now. Let's start with Stern.
Well, you got to know, if you're getting in, and you know this, Deborah, if you're going to get into the world of entertainment, you must understand that if you're lucky enough to get your 15 minutes, enjoy it while you're there and salt away your money, because you're going to need it. The day is going to come when the next pretty face is going to come in and replace you, and you have to step aside. You don't have to like it, but you have to understand it, because when we came in, we were new, fresh. Nobody had heard it. Everybody listened to Mark and Brian. And then after 6 years, they had heard it and they were ready for the next new thing. And that was Howard. I mean, Howard is the greatest morning entertainer I've ever heard. The absolute greatest interviewer. I didn't appreciate the way that he did it. He came in, he was bad-mouthing us. He talked about my wife and kids on the air and attacked them. But that was his bag. That was his thing. And he won. He became number one. And, you know, having been in radio for most of my life, I understood ratings. I understood that those things are going to happen. I got it. I understood it. But what I didn't understand was that Howard's verbal attack was psychological warfare. And I noticed people that I worked with, friends of mine, were looking at me differently because they were believing the stuff that he was saying. And that I wasn't ready for that. And that affected me, Brian, everybody it affected all of us. And the one thing that I'll say is that, and the book depicts this, you know, a successful career is still ripe with real life. Right. And I have had the greatest day and the absolute worst day on the same day, because, you know, everything is escalated. When you are hugely successful, when you have a downfall, it's a bad one. So adversity, it is part of it. And that was at a very high level. And I had never run into that. And I handle some of it well and some of it not. But I do know that real life brings the good and the bad. Yeah. And you are judged by the way that you handle each of them. And I learned that the hard way, and I dealt with it incorrectly in certain ways. But the one thing I did do is what I've always done. When something bad happens, I attack it. It's not going to go away. So unless I dealt with it, it's going to stay there. And so I did deal with it as quickly and as efficiently as I could, because, as I said, this is real life. This is what it is. That part is just there.
Yeah, and I'd like to tease the book a little bit to our audience. You do talk about that. You talk about a very tough time in your own life personally, right? What you went through. If you want to touch on that now, that's great.
Let's do it.
Yeah, go ahead.
What Deborah's talking about is I went through an incredibly serious, well, I'll give it to you this way. I was, when we fell, when our ratings fell, Brian and I fell. There was second guessing between us. We were no longer connected as we once were. And I kind of, for whatever reason, launched myself into the mode of, let's keep this going. Here we go. Come on, right. Let's do this. And even though I was a seasoned radio guy and I knew how to put on an entertaining radio show, I started saying yes to things that I would never agree to, ever. But I was just trying to, here we go. Let's keep it going. Let's keep it moving. And I became somebody I didn't know. I didn't recognize this guy that I had become, saying yes to crap that was ridiculous. And one morning, I remember I got in the shower, and as I was reaching to turn the water on, my hand was shaking. And I had this uneasy feeling. I didn't know what it was, but I just felt uneasy about something, and I didn't know what it was. And as the days passed, it got worse and worse. As I would get closer to the radio station each morning driving, it would be at its highest. And I went to, after dealing with that for a while, I went to a general doctor, and I explained to him, and he said, it sounds like anxiety to me. Yeah. And I wound up going to therapy to try to figure out what it was. And I guess, Deborah, as hard as it was to go through, and I got to tell you, this, I don't know what kind of anxiety other people have had, but I was at my wit's end. It took all the joy out of my life. There's no rest from it. It never stops. I couldn't sleep. And the most frightening thing is that I didn't know what it was, and I couldn't control it. And so through therapy, I basically understood and was taught to understand that my body, when I went through that change of becoming whatever yes man I had become, my inner self, and I guess I'm lucky, but my inside, my inner self was saying, look, I don't know who you are. I don't know what's going on here, but we're not doing this. Take a little bit of anxiety with you. And it was the basic center of the whole thing, is that I'm lucky that I have to be who I am. I don't have a choice, because I'll attack myself, because that's what I did. Yeah. It was only when I returned to the guy that I know as me that the anxiety started to wane. So I don't have a choice. I have to be this.
But once again, you're that same Mark that you were back in Alabama, right? Yes. You had to do this to get there.
Yes.
I mean, that's been really your life story.
But that's the guy I had to get back to. I had to get back to that guy.
Yeah. And I fully understand that. I really do. And, that's another great part of the book, because so many people, so many of us struggle like that. And it's always, at least for me, helpful to realize, gosh, I'm not alone. Look what
Deborah, that's why I did it. When I was going through it, anxiety is a mental illness. And I was terrified at the time. I was terrified that people would find out that I was struggling. Who wants to be mentally ill? Who wants that? And once I got on the other side of it and I decided to write this book, I purposely included it because I have heard people admit to certain things, famous people that you would never think that they fought with that, and how enlightening it was to realize I'm not alone. I know that millions suffer from anxiety, and I specifically put it in the book in detail to let people know, if you're going through it, I made it, you can make it, you're okay. I wanted people to know that.
Yeah. So after 25 years, you and Mark, you and Brian.
I answer to both.
Now, I'm sure, believe me, I'm sure you do. And I know that's the first time it's happened to you. You're off the air. What did that feel like? And then you left town, right? You don't live here anymore. You have been married for a long time to your beautiful wife, Linda. You host a podcast with her. You've got 3 wonderful children who are now adult children. So you've got a really balanced life now. And I say that because I know what it can be like out here. It's a whirlwind. And then also you step away. So what was that like for you initially when the show ended and you decided to leave? Was it just the next evolution for you?
Well, first of all, and I say it in the book, I couldn't wait to get out. I was with Brian for 27 years and we had literally drained every bit of juice out of that fruit. There was nothing left. The show was dead. And to be quite honest, I stayed longer than I wanted because the company kept offering massive pay to do it.
Well, there
and
you
go. I knew that I would never have the opportunity to bring the security for my family like that. So I stayed longer than I wanted. So when the day came that it was over, I was incredibly relieved. And to be honest with you, there were several reasons why we moved to North Carolina. One, both my wife and I are from the South, and it's familiar territory to me.
Right.
And we have a beautiful property on the lake and absolutely adore it. But having said that, now that my kids have given me 2 grandchildren, my wife and I have purchased a property here in Southern California. So we're kind of going back and forth. But to be honest with you, Deborah, I didn't miss it at all. 27 years of great radio. I was able to step away because my cup runneth over.
Yeah.
I accomplished more than I ever thought that I could. And I think a lot of people stay longer than they should or go back to it because they feel like I didn't accomplish what I wanted. I need to keep going. I didn't feel that. I did not feel that. And the biggest thing that I don't miss, don't get me wrong, I will always miss concocting a stupid idea, building it and putting it on the air and have people love it. I'll never get over that. But, and you'll know this more than most, what I do not miss is the grind. Because every day when we would finish a radio show, I would immediately start building the next day's show. Because the dividing line between winners and losers is consistency. It does you no good to be incredible on Tuesday and mediocre on Wednesday. I was as good as I could be every single day. So as soon as the show would end, I would start building the next one. That process would take me all day and half the night until I went to bed to get up and do it again. I don't miss that part. It's like any job for anybody, that grind, but you have to do it if you're going to be great at what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell us now, people, you can buy the book. See where it says there on the screen, buy the book, put your phone up right to that, and you can purchase the book. This is a great read. I read a lot of books. You all know that. And this is one of my favorites. I absolutely love it because I really, really felt like I got to know the man behind that incredible voice.
Well,
and I know you intimately now from this because you shared everything. You shared so much, and you're just going to have to read this to find out a lot of the rest of it because all we did was touch on this much of it. Tell me the proceeds for the book, they go where?
Thank you. Deborah, I'll go to the book for a second. When I decided to write it, I knew that I was going to be completely honest because that's quite frankly how I roll in life and as an author. I was going to tell the truth. I was going to tell the truth without being rude. I was never gonna lead you to believe that Brian and I were skipping down the yellow brick road holding hands and everything was great. I was honest that we had our difficult times. David Lee Roth said it best. He was on the show and he talked about being with the same people for a long time. And he said, we'd be in another hotel in another town and eating room service. And I'd look over at Eddie and I'd say, you know what, man, I hate the way you chew. And because it's true. Yeah. Familiarity breeds contempt. And Brian and I just quite simply got to the point that we hated the way each other chewed. So the book, I'm very, very honest with everything that what was happening behind the scenes. And after I'd finished it, I knew that I needed to call my attorney and say, hey, I'm going to, sell this book. There's money coming in. We got to do something with it. And it was, I don't know, the universe, something said, you should give some of the money to charity. My wife and I have always been very charitable. Mark and Brian was always very charitable. And it was then that it dawned on me, I need to give back to the puppies and the kittens that have been my pals all my life, from the moment I was born until right now. The unconditional love that my animals have given me, no human is capable of giving me that. And in their honor and in their memory, I decided that I would give not some, but 100% of the proceeds, meaning once the bills are paid, everything goes to Allison Eastwood's rescue ranch. She's trying to build this shelter. Allison touched my heart when I heard her plight. She goes into kill shelters.
Yeah.
And she says, every dog and cat that's scheduled to be put down, I want them. And right now, she and her volunteers take them to their homes. She's trying to get the rescue ranch built, a place where they take these animals, veterinary care, warm place to sleep, food, water, and teach the public, if you want an animal, come there. And so I'm trying to help her get that built. And so if I can talk you into buying this crap book, then just know that every penny you spend is going to go to that. And you go to my website, myadventureswithmarkandbrian.com. We've got the audio book that I read, the ebook, the soft cover, the hardcover sold out. But we do have plenty.
Yeah, please. Would you put me in touch with Allison? I'd actually like to interview her about what she's doing. I think
of course.
Yeah, that'd be great. I know of her work, and when I read about, where all the proceeds go, I thought, gosh, I've got to get her on. So I would appreciate that, because I know she does need all the help she can get. And the fact that you're donating 100%, that's really beautiful, Mark. That really, really is. So thank you. I can't thank you enough for joining us. I mean, maybe we'll have you back on again if you'd ever come on. There's a lot to talk about in this book. I feel like we gave away just a little so that people go, that's it, I'm ordering. So obviously they could get the book on your website, Amazon, anywhere.
And the soft cover is available on Amazon. The other ones are available at myadventureswithmarkandbrian.com. And Deborah, if you get Allison, I want to send you her video that explains fully what it is that she's doing. You must see that, and then you're going to get it. It's just going to hit you. It's going to hit you hard. So I would love to set that up. I thank you so much for the time. I couldn't have enjoyed more speaking with you, as opposed to some of the media that I've done. You actually listen. There are many
book. A lot of people will not read the books, which always amazes me. I'm like, how do you do an interview if you don't read this? You have to know the person. I feel like I really know you now because of so much that you divulged to us in your book. So it's a beautiful thing. And that's an honor to me, coming from somebody like you, who is one of the greatest legends in this business. So the honor is mine. And I want to say one thing about animals. That little guy that you hear, Leonardo, we rescued him, and he was about to be put down. And we're like, no. He's got his tooth hanging out. He has a limp. And we thought, oh no, that guy's perfect for us. He'll be coming home with us. So the fact that he joined in on our interview, I'm good that you were a good sport.
It was meant to be, Deborah. It was meant to be, because that's the point. Beautifully done. Tell your dog I love him or her.
Yeah. And I will, and he'll listen. So appreciate it. Love to have you back.
Anytime.
Give my best to Linda as well. And a shout out to the podcast you do with her, please.
Yes, the Mark and Linda podcast. We do it once a week. You can find us at mnlstudios.com. She and I have been married 41 years, but I don't think we're going to make the day. I think we're just about to end this thing. And just wrap it up, because 41 years. I keep thinking it's gonna get better, but now Yeah, I think today's the day. She's going to kick me out, or I'm going to kick her out.
Yeah, that's what I always say to my husband. I'm like, look, you're on a string. At any moment, there's the door, and we've been together. You don't even want to know. Over 25 years. I'll just leave it at that. So, that in itself, being with people, in this business, that's not so easy either. So, congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
And thank you so much, Mark Thompson, host of the Mark and Brian Show, one of my favorite shows ever in Los Angeles, who wrote this book. Please pick it up. Don't bump the record, kid. My Adventures with Mark and Brian. Thank you. Once again, it's been an honor. And everybody, you can find our interview on YouTube, on Facebook, and we're going to post it on Instagram. And then the audio version on iHeart, on Amazon, Apple, just about anywhere that you get your podcast. Just look us up, Deborah Kobylt Live and Mark Thompson. Thank you so much for joining us. And oh my gosh, we didn't even give a shout out to the other Mark Thompson. Hello, the other Mark Thompson, who's also one of my super duper closest friends, who was on with Tim Conway Jr. the other night, and I heard you all just bantering. It was fabulous. So,
they were great. Yeah, they were they're easy to talk to.
Yeah, it's a club, this little thing, right?
Yeah.
So shout out to you. Anyway, thank you again, and everybody, thank you for tuning in to Deborah Kobylt Live. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.